Hello to all my friends. Today we will speak about ableism. Ableism definition and overview. Ableism is a discrimination, prejudice, or social prejudice against people with disabilities. It is rooted in the belief that typical abilities are superior, and it often results in people with physical, cognitive, and sensory or mental health conditions being treated as inferior, less capable, or invisible. Ableism manifests in many forms, ranging from overt exclusions and bullying to subtle forms like lack of accessibility or patronizing attitudes. Psychological effects of ableism impacts psychological health in profound ways, often leaving invisible scars that can persist across lifetime. In the following slides, I am trying to provide some key effects, that is, key psychological effects with examples and some narration. The first point is internalized ableism. When individuals with disabilities absorb society's negative views, they may begin to devalue themselves. For example, a child with cerebral palsy who constantly hears peers calling him slow or different may begin to believe he is not capable of achieving success in academics or sports. Over time, this belief may reduce self esteem and cause identity confusion. The psychological impact on that child would be chronic self doubt, low self worth, depression, and further anxiety. The second one is social isolation and loneliness. Exclusion from social settings, whether due to physical inaccessibility or negative attitudes, leads to deep emotional pain. For example, a college student who uses a wheelchair is often left out of group outings because the venues chosen aren't wheelchair accessible. She starts to feel like a burden and avoids initiating friendships. The psychological impact on that particular student would be social withdrawal, increased risk of depression, poor interpersonal development. The third one is stigma and labeling. Negative stereotypes like disabled people are asexual, they always need help, result in societal labeling. For example, a man with schizophrenia is referred to as dangerous by coworkers, even though his condition is managed and manageable. This persistent labeling isolates him from professional growth and peer acceptance. The psychological impact on that person would be chronic stress, self stigmatization, difficulties maintaining employment and relationships. The fourth point will be trauma from institutional abuse. Historically, disabled individuals have faced forced institutionalization, abuse, and denial of rights. For example, until the 1970s in many countries, people with intellectual disabilities were institutionalized in asylums under inhumane conditions, often without consent or due process. Survivors of these systems report PTSD, mistrust, and emotional numbing. The psychological impact on that person's people will be post traumatic stress disorder, learned helplessness, long term mistrust of systems and authorities. The fifth point is chronic stress and mental health disorders. Navigating a world designed for able bodied individuals creates ongoing stress. For example, a blind person constantly has advocate for braille on public signage, accessible websites, or support in stores. This continuous labor of self advocacy can lead to emotional exhaustion. The psychological impact on that blind person would be burnout, anxiety disorders, feeling of alienation. The summary of psychological effects on ableism would be internalized stigma because of cultural beliefs, social invisibility. Outcome would be low self-esteem and depression. For social isolation, causes are lack of access and inclusion. Outcome would be loneliness and anxiety. Abuse in institutions, causes would be neglect and systemic failure. Outcome would be PTSD and trust issues. Employment discrimination, the causes would be bias in hiring and retention. Outcome would be economic stress, loss of purpose. Educational exclusion, the causes would be infrastructure and attitude barriers. Outcome would be inferiority complex, reduced cognition. Gender based ableism, causes are patriarchy, disability. Outcome would be trauma, hypervigilance, emotional shutdown. To summarize, ableism is more than just social bias. It is chronic psychological burden that affects identity, dignity, and mental health. Addressing it requires systematic change, empathy, education, and the inclusion of disabled voices in decision making. Acknowledging its psychological toll is a crucial step toward true equality and mental wellness. Please subscribe this channel and click bell button for more such psychology education videos. Thank you for watching.